Hey, Stephanie, I think I'm going to move into this really nice 200-year-old house I found on Craigslist. I mean, it's mostly made of bones and cobwebs, and the refrigerator bleeds sometimes and screams. But I really like it. Could you help me move my couch?
This sounds interesting. A couple questions. Being that we're in New York, is it an Optimum building or do you have FiOS? And what train are you next to?
I think, let me check the ad. Oh, God, no. Oh, God, it's the G train.
Ah!
Ah! A plus bit.
Yeah, that was a good bit. So this is Stephanie, and we also have Jack here. This is the horrible idea. Each week we pick a scary movie. We talked about it. Sometimes I'm scared, sometimes I'm not. Mostly, Jack continues to have a pulse. If you have a movie that you think might scare us, hit us up on Instagram at the horrible idea, or on Twitter at horriblepod. What are we watching this week, Jack?
We are watching a movie that I know you loved, the 1987 Clive Barker masterpiece, Hellraiser.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into it. I really didn't like this movie.
Why don't you tell us some facts about it?
So this was released September 10th, 1987, directed as you said by Clive Barker, also who also wrote the screenplay, which is based on his novella The Hellbound Heart, on a budget of $1 million and a box office of $14.6 million.
Yeah, IMDb gave it a 7 out of 10, and critics and audiences agree. It is a 72% movie.
Yeah, that's one of the most consistent
solid
opinions
C.
we've gotten. um, yeah, so this was your pick, and I want to give you an opening here to talk about the supplemental or source material.
Sure.
Which I know you're a fan of.
Instead of the devil's advocate, I'll be the Cenobite advocate for this one. This is the first in a 10-movie franchise, which also includes books and graphic novels and video games and audio and, costumes and Photoshop worldwide. And, we'll get into it, but I can understand why you didn't click with this one. I think the book is much better and much more beautiful and explains a lot more and is, just kind of like a better medium for this imagery.
Yeah. I mean, we'll break it down, but I think So I watched this movie. I've not read the supplemental material. I've never seen any of these other movies, nothing. I mean, I know of Clive Barker, and I'll talk later about some things that I like by Clive Barker, but
and you've
my
seen
impression,
Pinhead.
I know of him. I know that he exists. And I knew there was a little box. But, the impression I got from talking to other people about this after I watched the movie was they were like, oh, yeah, but in the book this or, this and that. And I was like, okay, but that's not conveyed in the movie. So,
right.
It's really cool that there's all this background. And if I had read that, maybe I would have, vibed with it more. But those ideas that sound really cool, I didn't get those from the movie, is, the problem.
Well, as another movie that we enjoyed together once, sometimes a horror writer will try to direct a movie. And sometimes
right.
that horror writer will also do cocaine.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like there are really cool vibes in this.
Yeah.
Mostly, I think, in the last, 15 minutes. But a lot of the, that's where it succeeds to me, is, the character creation of, the Cenobites and all of the other, monsters and stuff. Which is one of the ways that I discovered Clive Barker was through, his paintings, which I think are really unique and cool. And so I think he's in that type of visual format, he's like super, super talented. And not that this is a total failure, but I just think the things where it peaks is those like monsters and stuff, and not so much like the drama.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But
You watch a movie like this, and it becomes very apparent, like what makes a good director and like what a director's skill set is. And I think Clive Barker is a good storyteller, and he is also a playwright and sort of like he's multidisciplinary. And yeah, he's just not a good or wasn't a good director at this point.
it was also, you know, relatively early in his career, and like, you know, and also this is one of the things where I'm like, if I had watched this in the 90s, would it have hooked me like
Sure.
different than now, you know,
Yeah.
which is a thing that I've come across with a lot of these 80s movies.
Right.
But anyway,
So my history with this is I saw it probably in the early 90s. I was pretty young, and I saw the movie first, and then I read the novella, and then I just like went on a tear and read lots of Clive Barker books, all of his books of blood. That was like my main. I didn't read actually a lot of like I didn't read the series you mentioned. I didn't read his Weave World stuff. I pretty much just read the books of blood and the sort of things in that world. And I've seen a couple of other Hellraisers. They're not very memorable, except for Hellraiser Bloodline, which is like Hellraiser in space. And spoiler alert, they build like a space station that is actually one giant La Marchante box, so they can like.
does it move around in the same way?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Those special effects must have been
Oh, yeah.
amazing.
Well, yeah, this was like in, I think, 2000 or something, so it was a little better, but.
So it's like Star Wars prequels level
Sure, it's very.
era.
Yeah. Stargate.
Same budget, I'm sure, too.
All right.
So let's get into the plot breakdown here.
All right. I tried to condense this and tried to just do the plot of the movie, not of the book. I'll bring up some things that might be entertaining for you from the book later. But so Frank Cotton buys a mysterious cube puzzle from a shadowy figure in Morocco. Back at home, he solves the puzzle, cross-legged and sweaty, and is visited by 4 strange, scarred beings who are covered in hooks and blood and leather. That much explanation at that point. They rip him apart with their hooks. And then the leader takes the box back, and they all disappear. Sometime later, Frank's brother Larry and his wife Julia move into Frank's house. They are soon joined by Frank's daughter from another marriage, Kirsty, and they all begin cleaning up this gross house.
It's very gross. There were way too many cockroaches and maggots. So, in flashbacks, we learn that Frank invoked prima nocta and had an affair with Julia shortly before her marriage to Larry. Larry cuts himself while moving a mattress, and the blood drips to the floor in the attic room, somehow reanimating the remains of Frank. Julia finds Frank's partially reborn form, and he tells her that he needs blood to fully return. Julia begins seducing men and bringing them back home, killing them, and letting Frank feed. Eventually, Frank is almost whole, and he kills his brother and takes his face. In the meantime, Kirsty finds the cube puzzle and solves it, coming face to face with the same beings that killed Frank. She tells the beings that Frank survived, and they allow her to take the cube back home so they can see if it is true.
The beings, known as Cenobites, once more rip Frank apart. As they do, Kirsty finds the puzzle again, and after disturbing its configuration, throws it into a fire. It is taken from the fire by a vagrant who's sort of been in the background of the movie the whole time. And that vagrant transforms into a winged skeletal monster and brings it back to Morocco, where the dealer, in a very sort of Gremlins-esque scene, sells it to some new victim.
And the cycle continues.
The cycle continues. Questions? I'm sure you have many.
Well,
or you want to just you just spread out a little and think about this one.
Yeah. So okay, I think a couple things are going on here. One, this movie has been really hyped up for me.
Right.
Because I've never seen it before. It's in a lot of pop culture. The Cenobite's Pinhead. I know he's not referenced as Pinhead in this, but he's, a common cultural, fixture. And then, so I've just heard about this a lot. And then I think watching it, well, one, I don't think it was as successful in the wait until the very end to show the monster thing. I wanted the Cenobites way earlier.
Right.
Well,
you got them right in the beginning.
Right. It's like there's a little teaser, and then then it's just an hour plus of Frank and Julia and Larry, and I didn't really like any of them. The dinner party, and I don't know, maybe it's because it's so dated, but I thought Frank just looked like a dork. He was not a sex god to me, so I was when he shows up at the door in the flashback and he's all wet from the rain, I was just wait, this is the guy? So I think that's where I lost it a little bit, because I was kind of wait, Julia's doing all this for this guy, and he doesn't even look like that. He's just a bloody skeleton with some goop on him. I don't know. And so in talking to other people, I read about that there's more background to Frank in the book, and that they kind of, it fills in some of the blanks as far as him being kind of a hedonist and kind of pushing the limits of sexuality and all these things. And the only way I got that in the movie was there were a couple of Polaroids of him. Right. And then after he sleeps with Julia, he's it's never enough. And that was kind of it. Oh.
Ain't that the truth, Frank?
I was all right. So I don't know. So do you feel and you referenced it a little bit in the beginning, but do you feel your enjoyment of this movie is definitely enhanced by having read the novella and things like that and seen the other movies? Do they get
Absolutely.
into it more?
I mean, I did see the movie first, but I was young, and this is one of those movies when you're 16 and you're ooh, hooks
Sure.
and leather and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I think I liked it to the point where I went to the library and got the book the next day. And
right.
Yeah, definitely. This book is just sort of stirring up all the memories. And yeah, you can see how poorly they portrayed a lot of the narrative. I'll just give a couple of quick book facts just to sort of fill in the picture. So and it's not a book, it's a novella, I think it's
right.
maybe 30 or 40,000 words.
But it gives more text, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah,
Frank.
lots. And Clive Barker, which you've read some of his stuff, but this, especially when he was young, he was way more flowery and just and very graphic and sort of and he was poetic. And so the whole maybe first 1/3 of the novel is just Frank going around the world and doing drugs and having sex and being men are not enough, women are not enough, drugs are not enough, I need more. And then he hears about this box and he just has to have it, and that whole kind of quest. Right. And another really weird choice, and I don't know why. So Larry,
the brother,
the brother in the book, his name is Rory, which is a much better name. And then Kirsty is not his daughter. She's just sort of like his friend. Which is like, there's a much different dynamic between him and Christy and Julia. But,
Right.
and then the biggest, and, kind of complicated to talk about on a podcast, but so the reason the blood reawakens him is because when he was in that room and the Cenobites arrived, or like they were about to arrive, he masturbated to completion. And
Frank did.
yes, and his seed was left on the floor. And then when his brother cut himself, that mixed with that, and that did some kind of magic thing.
Right. Okay, so that was one of my questions, was what about the blood made it possible for Frank to reanimate? And that I thought, when I saw that, when it was Larry, I was like, oh, it must be some bloodline, blood ties or something like that. And that's why when he needs more blood to like reanimate, I was like, oh, that's why he says Kirsty, because like he needs the familial blood or something. But that's not the case. It's just like he's being creepy.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
So I don't know. So yeah, that part I didn't get. Although I will say, so that's the thing. I feel like some of the visuals in this are really cool. Right. It's just that then I get pulled out of it a little bit because I'm like, wait, what? Like when he kind of oozes up out of the floorboards and everything, I thought that was actually really cool. And the way it was done, it was gross, obviously, but it was really well done considering that this wasn't a gigantic budget and they had, the technology of the 80s and everything. And the makeup and everything on Frank kind of throughout, I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Except for his guy liner from pre-death. The
novella does it more, but I don't know if you've ever read Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like playing on that, because like his is literally at one point his heart is underneath the floorboards beating and she hears it. So
because they have that in the sound effects, or like that's kind of So yeah, it does seem like the kind of a lot of this is enhanced by the novella, because even I was reading online, someone was like, oh, it's like a queer classic, and I was like, well, it was all very like hetero as far as I could tell. And then they were like, well, no, in the book Frank he's
bisexual,
with men or women. I'm like, yeah, but that's not conveyed in the movie. I didn't like see that, which is neither here nor there, but like if that were more played into the movie, I would have been like, oh, well, that's that's interesting, like that he's just like that, if his hedonism and like all of that was a little bit more foregrounded. Because as it stands, it was just sort of like, oh, he's this scamp who had sex with his brother's fiance, and then she is still dickmatized after all these years. Like, or I don't even know how long it was supposed to have been. Was it only a couple of years?
It seems like it, because they've been married for a while, it seemed like. And they were living in Brooklyn at one point.
Oh,
she's like, it's better than Brooklyn.
Well, I was going to say, you must have been fully on the side. Well, I don't even know whose side you were on, but when she said it's better than Brooklyn, and I think at one point Larry says that too, I was like, man, Jack must have had his, raised his ire when they said that.
Yes, my cockles, everything was raised. And that's it. And in the book, it's like London and sort of like different vibe. But
wait, where were they supposed to be?
They don't
Long
really
Island
say. Yeah, it's like maybe Connecticut or something, like upstate New York. Yeah, they never really get into where it is.
Because at first I thought maybe it was London because of just Julia's accent. So I was
but
like,
then no one
maybe
else
they moved
has an
back to
accent.
her home. Yeah.
They also never explain her accent in any way. Funny fact about the queerness of Clive Barker. So I'm like, I guess late high school, I start reading his books. I get really into it. I start college. I'm like, just devouring all his books. And then I'm talking to someone about it in like an English class, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's great." And he's like one of the only, gay writers that's really like popular right now. And I was just like, Clive Barker is gay? Holy shit, everything makes so much more sense.
Yeah, and like, so I mean, I came to know of Clive Barker like in the aughts, so I
Right.
by then the internet was out, and once I kind of read about him, and all that. But so that's why I was kind of like, well, I wish that it had not been so kind of all the relationships been so kind of explicitly hetero. But then again, it's only an hour and a half movie. I don't know. I just like, I wish a little more time had been devoted. Like, have one fewer of Julia's like little seduction kills and like put in a little bit more background on Frank so that I'm more invested in like, oh yeah, okay, this guy is worth doing all this crazy shit for.
Yeah. No, they definitely needed a seduction montage. But also like that is totally like I could have seen many versions of this script where in many different ways Barker would have like referenced bisexuality or whatever, pansexuality. Sure. And that would be like the first thing some movie producer would be like, yeah, it's 1987. We can't have anyone be gay
sure.
in any way.
Yeah, I guess like, yeah, it's just like having not known really much about this movie, like I didn't get those vibes. And so like it didn't hit that like gear for me in the same way that I think it has for other people who have watched it multiple times and grown up with it and know kind of more of the backstory or whatever.
Right. So who among these very subtle and well put together characters were your favorite? Well,
so I didn't really like any of the human characters that much. Like the Cottons were all kind of they weren't really that interesting to me, but I did really like the Cenobites. No, I didn't. I did really like the Cenobites, and since I didn't really like the Cottons, it was very easy for me to be like, okay, go Cenobites, rip them all apart. I especially like that Scorpion guy with the baby face.
I believe he was the engineer. No, wait. The engineer was in the wall. I don't know. I think that guy's actually just called like Chatter.
The Scorpion? No. The one that's like an actual Scorpion. Not the guy with the weird teeth.
Yeah, the guy who's
the one that chases Kirsty down the hall.
Yeah, that's the engineer.
With the stinger.
Yeah, that's the engineer.
It's like not one of the one. Oh, he kind of shows up. So yeah, I liked him. I did not like the dragon bat that was the like tramp earlier that was eating the crickets. That seemed kind of tacked on. I don't know. But the Cenobites were really cool. I really liked Pinhead's like major domo, like kind of slightly more femme one. Like that. I liked the design of that character. And then there's the one with the little glasses. He was really funny. Yes. But yeah, so I kind of wish that I had gotten a little bit more of them. Maybe at some midpoint in the movie, or I don't know, maybe a little bit more in the beginning. Because that was like the part where I feel like the movie clicked into gear for me. And that was like an hour and 10 minutes where like they finally, come back to like take everyone down. But so like, are they more prominent in the other movies?
It's yes. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like very reactionary, where they're like, I think they were just going to be like the bad guys, and then everyone's like, "Oh, Pinhead's really cool," and so they're like, "All right, let's make him."
Well, and it's not even like I need them to be in the entire friggin' movie, because then it's like, okay, they lose some of their potency, but
that definitely happens.
Yeah, I mean, I guess or maybe if the drama had been a little bit more enticing to me, I wouldn't have cared. But yeah, anyway, they were definitely the highlight of the movie for me, was that body gang of weirdos. What about you?
Yeah, similarly. I mean, I did. I definitely realized that I like Frank because I liked Frank in the book, and I too, as you are fully aware, am a world-traveling hedonist who enjoys, rough sex and candles and photography. But yeah, Pinhead it's very interesting. So Pinhead is not called Pinhead in the book, and
Right.
Clive Barker.
I read that Clive Barker is mad at, or not mad, but like doesn't like it.
He doesn't like it, and he sort of like had fun with it at one point, where like somebody in one of the books called him Pinhead, and he like killed him because of it. But
Nice.
he's none of them are really named, but until later books. But he is eventually known as the Hell Priest.
Wait, Pinhead is
Yeah.
in the books?
In the book, he's
okay.
called the Hell Priest, and it's funny. I liked Kirsty, and it was interesting. There was this whole thing going on for me watching this movie because it was very much like an 80s horror movie in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the actors, except for maybe the Cenobites, thought they were in like they could have been in any horror movie. But you could tell the direction was like, all right, Kirsty, you're like the young daughter, but you're not innocent. You're actually kind of slutty, and you're really thirsty, and you want to get drunk, and you want to like go home with your boyfriend. And so there were lots of like weird things like that, where like characters were not acting the way they often acted in horror movies. So yeah, I didn't like Larry.
Oh, well, he's hard to like. I will say the actor did a good job in the turn when it's supposed to be Frank with Larry's face.
Yeah. Well, that actor is good. He's just like miscast.
The character of Larry is like he's just I was kind of laughing when him and Julia are in the bed and he's just like whining because he's having a bad dream or something, and she's just laying there awake in bed.
Yeah.
And she's just like, oh, I'd rather be like fucking that gross bloody zombie dude in the attic.
Or even some dude I pick up on the street and murder. That was another thing, like, so a lot of horror this in my mind was like a somewhat more mature horror movie, in that like the sort of element of like being punished for sin and things like that is usually very vague and sort of stupid in like a Friday the 13th. Like, some teenagers are making out and they need to die. This one, like, people are literally doing horrible things. It's like sleeping with your brothers, sleeping with, the brother of your fiance the night before you get married, and then killing people and having affairs and like doing all this shit. Like these are like serious,
right,
like bad things that they're doing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, Julia and Frank are pieces of shit for sure. Like, they're bad people. I mean, Larry just seems like, he's just having a rough time. Like, his wife doesn't like him anymore for he doesn't know why.
Right.
And
she's British for some reason.
I will say, I don't have the name of the actress in front of me, but the woman who played Julia, she had really, like, I love her eyes. She has really, like, serpentine almost eyes.
Yeah.
And her eye makeup was, like, really great in a lot of the scenes. I did notice that.
There also, I wrote down this note somewhere because there was this scene, like, after she killed, like, the second guy, like, after she cleaned herself up, like, her hair just kept getting more magnificent. Like, murder really, really helped her look.
It's because her hair is full of secrets.
Oh, yes. All right, I'm looking at my notes and I see there's been a change to our rundown. Instead of Stephanie's 6 degrees of separation, there is Stephanie's evangelism of something else Clive Barker did.
Yes. So my introduction to Clive Barker was actually through his YA series, the Aberrat series, which I am a huge fan of. So there are 3 books out, and he has said that it will be a 5-book series. So book 4 has been delayed for quite a while now. Clive Barker got really ill from toxic shock syndrome a little while ago and was recuperating for a while. I think he was like in a couple of comas. Like, he was really sick.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so his work has been, delayed for very good and good reason. But I know in an interview he did last year, the rest of the books he's almost finished. Anyway, so it's a 5-book series, and it started out from some paintings that he had made, and then they sort of coalesced into a story. And it was about this world called the Aberrat, where there are 25 islands, and each island represents an hour of the day. So there's like the 6 p.m. island, and then there's like the noontime island, and then of course there's the midnight island, which is the place where the bad guys live. And so it's the story of this girl. She lives in, I think it's Indiana in the United States, and she gets transported to the Aberrat, and goes on a whole adventure. But the real highlight of this series to me is the character of Christopher Carrion, who is the Lord of the Midnight Island. And he is just, the art of him is so cool. The character is so well developed. I really like him. His character wears this glass collar that goes up to like his nose, and it's got like pipes that connect from the collar to the back of his head, and his nightmares come out and like swim around in the collar, like next to his face, and like when he gets upset they like glow, and it's just a really cool character design. And so the books are you can get them just with text, but the best thing about them is that every few pages there's one of Clive Barker's paintings throughout the story, and so you really get a sense of like the characters and the place, and it's really cool. And in the whole kind of, there's that huge YA boom in the late 90s and in the aughts, and this one really just stood out as something that was really unique and different, and didn't at all play down to the YA audience. Like, obviously the protagonist is like a teenage girl, but it doesn't talk down to the audience. It has really kind of sophisticated themes, but really the winner, I think, is just the art and the character creation, which again is one of the things that I thought was really cool about this movie, was the creation of the Cenobites, and
Frank,
just the design of them, the makeup, all of that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I've never read it. I will shout out another Clive Barker creation. I don't know how many movies he's directed, but the only one I know of that is from the same sort of world. So he did this series called The Books of Blood, and they're sort of, some of them are interconnected, but they're all sort of, horror stories in a Poe meets, sex worker kind of world. So he did one called The Last Illusion, and he made that into a movie in 95 called Lord of Illusion, which starred Scott Bakula as this...
I can't hear illusion without thinking about...
Illusion.
Arrested Development.
Yes.
Sorry.
He's the Lord of Illusion. So another character that pops up a lot is this kind of magical private investigator, Harry Demore. And so Lord of Illusion is this great, I love noir stories, and I love not all, but some urban fantasy type stuff, and this is, a very dark play on urban fantasy of like this sort of magical private investigator and devil worshippers, and it's it's a fun movie. I would not say it is a, he's not a great director. It's corny in some ways, but it also gets a lot into like there's a bunch of real stage magicians in it. And that's cool. But yeah, I
Yeah,
would check that one
I
out.
feel like you just have to. I feel like the advice I would give myself if I could do a Tenet thing, a temporal pincer movement, and go
Sure,
back
sure.
and like tell myself something before this movie, I would be like, just feel the vibes.
Feel the vibes, man. Or
Just
or
don't.
do the there's a another thing I would highly suggest if anybody did like this movie or just sort of like this movie, there's an audio version of the novella that is read by Clive Barker. That's really good. There's a few other different versions of it as well, but if you can get the one by Clive Barker, it's only like 2 hours long.
Right.
So
So, Jack, why don't you hit us with your Hellraiser adjacent pitch of the week?
yeah, well, it's not adjacent. I think we just reboot it, man. Um, you know, get a couple of young players in there, and if you do it as like a HBO series or something, like 6 or 8 episodes, you do like the entirety of the first two are just Frank banging his way through Marrakesh, for opium and magic. Um, and then the third one, you do the whole Cenobite thing. They, and you
Or
really
like a
like,
bottle episode about the Cenobites?
yeah, yeah, you do a bottle episode about Cenobite that takes place in the hell dimension, and at the end of that, they appear to Frank and rip him up, and then halfway through, you totally change it up, and then you have like 5 years later, Rory and Julia, coming into the house and doing all that.
Dealing with all the maggots.
Yeah.
That was so gross.
And you do all the seducing and killing the dudes. You do that as a nice, fun montage, maybe with like a Bee Gees song over it.
Yeah, some kind of needle drop. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Ooh, no, ABBA, Take a Chance on Me. That's what I'd do. Um, so, getting to the root of this, what is the horrible idea?
Well, so I know. It's hard for me to remember whether I read this online or whether they say it in the movie. But I know that I read online that there's something about the Cenobites dimension where it's like, or them, that they cannot distinguish between pain and pleasure.
Right.
Or
Do you want me
that
to
it's
explain
like,
that a little, or do you want to just go
well,
on?
so, yeah, but so just based on that and kind of based on the movie, like I said, I think if they had foregrounded some of Frank's escapades, it would have been more clear. But I think they're trying to get at like just constantly escalating experience and sensation and coming closer and closer to the edge and needing a little bit more of a hit each time, and until kind of you do yourself in, and the that excess has a terminal point where the axis tips, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the what is it, the road to hell is not paved with good intentions, but the road to excess leads to, there's some saying that's about the road to excess. Anyway, cut this part out. I don't know what I'm saying. So yeah, I guess maybe what's your background on the
Yeah, I mean,
Cenobites and
similar. It's interesting. Clive Barker's an interesting guy because I think from everything I've read about him, he is a sort of hedonist, and he's writing this story as sort of like the peril of decadence, so a little background on him too. When he started, he was like a playwright and an artist and like lots of different things. And for a while, he was also a sex worker in London. Um, and from what I understand, he was sort of into BDSM and some other things. So I think he sort of saw a lot of, people who get into really intense things begin to like blur the line between pain and pleasure, and sort of like, you're like in with drugs or anything else, you're like chasing that dragon of like, you need more, you need it to be more intense, you need it to be harder. And to sort of go back to what I was going to explain about the Cenobites, they sort of like, it is both implied and then directly stated that like a lot of them started as humans who just like kind of did what Frank did, where they like just wanted more and more and more until they, kind of traversed this mortal coil into a dark plane of where pain and pleasure meet.
Lots of chains and goop. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at like, to me, all the Cenobites are sort of exaggerated bondage things. There's like a lot of piercings that then become, just like a whole, barbed wire through your face kind of thing. And like,
yeah, they look like you'd like see them at a goth club. Yeah.
Right. And even like, Pinhead has all this stuff, but he also kind of has like cutouts for his nipples and hooks through his nipples and stuff. So it's like sort of this, to me, it's like this exaggerated S&M, like if you exponentially increased your kinkiness, this is where you would end up, kind of thing.
Yeah. So the quote I was trying to think of was William Blake.
Right.
The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom, for we never know what is enough until we know what is more than enough.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Tropes and cliches. It was a little less cliche than a lot of things that we've watched lately.
Yeah.
James
I
Wan.
would say. Well, there's some, he's drawing on some of that,
Sure.
like the object, the
Right.
haunted object, the final girl who's, she's, well, I would say she's a different kind of final girl, but I mean, they're kind of basic, right? It's just like the girl that is alive at the end.
Yeah.
My favorite one, which is very niche, is horny manual laborers.
Yeah, from Poltergeist.
Because Poltergeist, there were the workers that were like hitting on the daughter, and same thing in this one. And that was kind of a funny scene too, because that's when they're like, "Oh, Kirsty's hot. She takes after her mom," and Larry's like, "Her mom is dead."
Those movers were like,
ooh.
they were definitely like they were like cameramen or something. Like,
they were like, "Hey, she's hot."
Yeah.
It was a very big one-line performance. And then the one you mentioned, which was moving into a new house, which is
right. It seems like every movie
classic.
we've done.
We've done so many house movies. But I mean, it's effective because it is like a big deal, and especially like with kids, I think it's like a big deal.
Sure.
I don't know.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And that's why like also there's divorce in a lot of them too. Like
Right.
I think horror movie writers are often drawing from these like very pivotal things that happened when they were kids or that they know like affect people. Right. All right. Let's hear your final reactions.
So I will say I've softened a little bit on this movie since right after I watched it. Like when I was done watching the movie, I was just sort of like, what? I was a little bit I more aggressively disliked it. I will say pretty much the whole domestic drama did not work for me.
Right.
I didn't get keyed into Frank and his story, kind of early enough. So I wasn't really that invested in him. When we were on like the third stage of him needing another body, I was like, okay, like when is he gonna have enough blood? I really wanted the Cenobites to show up. And I think where the movie does succeed is, the creature creation, the effects. I think that Frank, the makeup effects on Frank looked really cool. Especially once he's not the grayish blue monster anymore. Right. Once he stops saying, "Don't look at me," and he's fine with Julia looking at him, then he looks really cool with like the red veins on his face and everything. I thought that was a really cool effect. But yeah, I think it really failed for me because I didn't find Frank charismatic. And so then it really wasn't believable for me that anyone would go to the lengths that Julia does. For this guy that she slept with before she got married, who had a mullet and a back tat. And he just, when he gets out of bed and he's like, oh, it's never enough. I just was like, oh my God, this is totally the guy that like goes on vacation to Thailand and then he comes back to the US and he's like, life here just doesn't compare or something. And so I think, again, if I had a little bit more background if I had watched this when I was like 17, and wasn't so jaded about, men, maybe it would have hooked me a little bit better. There was the whole come to daddy thing, which I feel like when they did that in A Nightmare on Elm Street, I feel like it worked for me because Freddy is funny,
right?
And he's got, he's kind of gross, but he's got kind of a wit and charisma to him. And he was saying it
ironically too, sort of.
Yes,
like it was layers of irony and.
Yes. And in this, I just was like, well, wait, why is Frank now hitting on his niece? I just think I needed a little bit more to either the actor or the story of Frank to really key in on this. That being said, Cenobite's great. Pinhead, or whatever you said his preferred name is.
The Hell Priest.
Hell Priest. I said Lord Nightmare. I really liked him. I really liked all of his henchmen. The guy with the chattering teeth was cool. The scorpion. As much as I didn't really like the dragon bat, I thought it was, it added layers of creepiness to have that guy eating the crickets at the pet store. It added vibes to it. Again, I think if I were to have watched this with just the intention to, enjoy the vibes, and it hadn't been so sort of built up for me, I would have enjoyed it more. I think that that's kind of a common casualty for anyone who has a movie kind of like that they wait maybe too long to watch, and it's so kind of built up to a point where it's not really fair to the movie. The movie, it's an hour and a half horror movie from the 80s, Right. It was never meant to sustain that sort of, focus. But I really like Clive Barker, and I was glad that this one wasn't very scary because the world is scary enough. And so for scare factor, I would give it a 1. It really didn't scare me. There were definitely some gross moments. But, there weren't any jumps, and it was more just, creepy than scary. And then for an entertainment factor, I have to give it a 3 out of 10. I mean, and those 3 are all going to the Cenobites. Maybe I'll give it a 4, 1 for each of them.
Well, there are 5, but... Yeah.
Well, who's the 5th one? The Scorpion?
Yeah, the 5th one is the engineer. Because remember in the beginning, they all appear, all 4 of them appear, and then Frank goes, I thought there were supposed to be 5 of you. And Pinhead goes, the 5th will appear if needed.
Oh.
I've seen this movie a couple of times.
Oh, wow. I don't know what about... I'm looking at the picture of him. I don't know how he got the title of the engineer, but that's okay. Anyway,
Well,
I'm not giving it a 5. We'll stick with 4. But anyway, so maybe not for me or for this day, but yeah.
All right, fair enough. I liked it, and I think I've explained why. I think out of all the sort of franchises, I would like to see this rebooted in a sort of, modern aesthetic, modern technology, and maybe like some actors who are like would really get into it.
Yeah, I think it has good legs. Better than a lot of the other ones. You're right about that.
Throw some Game of Thrones people on it or something. And yeah, it all hooked up with nostalgia, and I think we're gonna hit that a lot in these of like, especially me, because I think I saw a lot of this stuff when I was a teenager that you haven't. So
right.
I'll have fondness for things like Gremlins that I,
Sure.
Not a great movie. All right, so scare factor, I give it a 2, sure. And entertainment, I gave it, I'll come down from what I wrote down here and I'll say a 7.
I mean, yeah, like you're right that I think, like when you're talking about how like the themes of this movie are a little more sophisticated, you're right about that. I think that the execution didn't work for me.
Right.
And I think that, like we've been saying, if a little bit more of the meat of that novella were, and the themes of that were kind of built into this, I think it would have risen a lot higher on my rating.
All right. So, what is up next?
So, next week we're taking it way back to talk about Fritz Lang's 1931 serial killer thriller M. And this one is available to stream on HBO Max. So, if you have that streaming service, which you should, it's a really good streaming service. They kind of botched their rollout, but it's not a ton of movies.
Or do what I did and get the password from your mom, since I don't have basic cable or any kind of cable.
Oh, I use your roommates. So in the meantime, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or you can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, RSS, Pod, Dream, whatever you use, Jack.
Downcast
Podwalk
is what I use.
Downcast. But yeah, reach out. We're on Instagram, Twitter. Hit us up.
And if you have any interesting facts about M, or about Hellraiser, or the Cenobites, or that inky plane beyond our sight where pain and pleasure mix, or if you have a suggestion for a movie that might scare us or delight us, let us know on Twitter, or email us at thehorribleidea@gmail.com.
And also, if you want to yell at me about how wrong I am about this movie, feel free. Tweet at us. Tell me how wrong I am. I know a lot of people love this movie, so I'm ready. I could take it.
And you may ask who we are. We are explorers of the further region of experience. Demons to some, angels to others.
That's for sure.
Good night.
Oh no.